All right, picture this. You're about to dig into a plate of delicious, fresh seafood, right?
Mm.
But instead of picturing a fishing boat out on the open ocean, battling the waves, what if I told you that seafood came from, like, a super high-tech, sustainable farm?
It's a whole other world.
It really is.
Okay.
And it's a career path that's, I think, way more important than people realize.
100%.
Today, we're diving deep into the world of aquaculture harvesting technicians.
Love it.
And to help us navigate these waters, so to speak, we're going to be pulling some insights from RoleCatcher.
Great
I
resource.
got some really interesting stuff on this. And trust me, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. It's a lot more complex and honestly, a lot more interesting than you might think.
Yeah.
So when we talk about aquaculture harvesting technicians, what exactly are we talking about? What does a day in the life even look like?
Yeah, it's a side of aquaculture that most people don't really think about, but it's absolutely crucial. We're not talking about just, scooping fish out of a pond here,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And I love how the RoleCatcher guide puts it. They use the phrase complex equipment and machinery. It definitely piqued my interest. Like, what kind of tech are we talking about here?
Well, think about it. You've got this whole blend of biology, right? You're dealing with living creatures, and then you've got engineering on top of that. You're talking about monitoring water quality in real time using sensors and data analysis. Then you have specialized equipment to actually track the fish as they grow, optimize harvesting schedules based on all this information that's coming in. It's light years away from those old traditional feeding methods.
Wow. So it sounds like you need a pretty unique skill set to be successful in this kind of a role. It's got to be more than just live in the ocean, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, sure, passion for sustainability, for marine life, that's a fantastic starting point. But you also need some serious practical know-how, and you need to be able to think analytically.
I see. I see. So talking about practical know-how, I noticed that the RoleCatcher guide lists this whole range of responsibilities for these technicians. I mean, they're involved in everything from those initial stages of preparation, getting everything set up, all the way to processing and packaging. So it seems like they're involved in literally every step of the process.
That's exactly right. It's really about managing that entire life cycle of, whatever organism they're harvesting. They make sure the conditions are optimal for growth, and then ultimately, they're responsible for a successful and sustainable harvest.
And speaking of sustainability, I mean, that definitely seems to be a huge theme that comes up again and again in the RoleCatcher guide.
And for good reason.
They talk about the growing demand for seafood globally and how aquaculture is really stepping up to meet that demand, but doing it responsibly.
It's a major issue, especially as the global population keeps growing. We've got to find ways to feed everyone sustainably, right? And traditional fishing methods, well, they just can't keep up. That's where aquaculture comes in. It's more controlled, it's better for the environment, and we can produce seafood on a much larger scale.
So, in a way, these aquaculture harvesting technicians are kind of on the front lines of making that happen, right?
100%. They're not just harvesting fish, they're helping create a more sustainable future for everyone.
That's a pretty cool way to think about it.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance, the global impact, but what about the day-to-day reality? Like, what is it actually like to work in this field? Because the RoleCatcher guide mentions that the work environment can be really varied. I mean, they even talk about international travel opportunities, which sounds pretty great. But they also hint at some of the challenges. Long hours, unpredictable conditions, things like that. So how do you find that balance? What's your take?
Well, it's definitely a trade-off, right? This isn't your typical 9 to 5 desk job. You're working outside, often in challenging conditions. You're working with living creatures, and things can change really quickly. So, yeah, you might have those early mornings, long days, especially during those peak harvest seasons. And of course, you're exposed to the elements.
So you need to be adaptable, able to roll with the punches a bit.
For sure. This is a career for someone who enjoys being hands-on, working outdoors, and someone who doesn't shy away from a little bit of a challenge. But let's not forget the rewards either. I mean, imagine being part of a team that's producing top quality, sustainable seafood, food that ends up on dinner plates all over the world.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. There's definitely a sense of purpose there that goes way beyond just clocking in and clocking out. No doubt about it. Okay, so we've talked about what it's like day to day, but what about the long term? What does the career path look like for someone in this field? Because RoleCatcher outlines this pretty clear progression, starting at entry level, working your way up to management. So what are some of those key milestones along the way?
Well, you're basically on this journey of constantly taking on more responsibility, gaining expertise as you go. So you might start with those more hands-on tasks like we talked about earlier.
Right, like monitoring the water quality, maybe helping out with the feeding schedules, things like that.
Exactly. But as you gain experience, you start to take on those decision-making roles. You might be overseeing a specific stage of the harvesting process. You could even be leading a small team.
So there's definitely room to grow and specialize within the field.
Absolutely. And it really depends on where your interests lie, right? So for someone who's really into data analysis, for example, there's a huge need for experts who can optimize those harvesting operations using the latest technology. I mean, it's incredible what they're doing with data these days. And then, of course, some people, they're natural leaders, right? They might gravitate more towards management, leading teams, making sure the whole operation is running smoothly, efficiently, sustainably.
It's interesting that you mentioned data analysis because that's something that RoleCatcher really emphasizes, this increasing role of technology in aquaculture harvesting.
Mhm.
Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what does that actually look like in practice?
Well, technology is completely revolutionizing how we manage and harvest seafood. I'm
Right.
talking about sensors, right, that constantly monitor fish behavior, environmental conditions, and all of that's happening in real time.
Wow.
Then you've got these AI algorithms that are actually predicting the optimal times to harvest.
No way.
Oh, yeah. And then on top of that, you've got automated harvesting systems. It's a really exciting time to be in this field because it's constantly evolving.
So going back to what we were talking about earlier with those complex equipment and machinery, I'm guessing we're not just talking about, nets and boats anymore.
No, not at all. I mean, those are still important, of course. But aquaculture harvesting technicians these days, they need to be tech savvy. They need to be able to troubleshoot issues, analyze data, adapt to new systems. And those skills are only going to become more and more important as the industry grows.
So it sounds like continuous learning is essential here. You got to stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. And that's something that the RoleCatcher Guide stresses too. They talk about certifications, they talk about staying updated on all the latest industry trends. It's a fast-moving field, always something new to learn.
That's really cool. It's so interesting to see how technology is really changing the game, not just in terms of the actual harvesting, but also when it comes to like finding these kinds of jobs. And speaking of which, RoleCatcher goes into a lot of detail about how their platform can really give job seekers an edge, in this competitive job market. They talk about, building a tailored CV, getting matched with potential employers, even practicing for interviews with AI. What's your take on that?
I think it's huge because let's face it, the job market is tough. So anything you can do to stand out from the crowd is crucial. And that's where technology can be so powerful, right? I think RoleCatcher does a fantastic job of leveraging technology to help candidates put their best foot forward.
So they're kind of taking some of that guesswork out of the job search process.
Absolutely. They use data, AI, all of that to connect you with the right opportunities. It's about presenting your skills, your experience in a way that really resonates with potential employers.
So you're not just like throwing your resume out there into the void, hoping someone will see it.
Yeah. Exactly. This is targeted, strategic job hunting.
I love it. So we've talked about the skills, the technology, but what about the personal qualities? What does it take to really thrive in this kind of role? What are those intangible things that make someone a good fit?
Yeah, it seems like this career path really calls for a unique combination of things, right? You need the technical know-how, the environmental awareness, and then, like you said, a good dose of old-fashioned grit.
You got it. To be successful in this field, you got to be adaptable, a problem solver,
Yeah.
someone who actually enjoys, working in an environment that's always changing, never predictable. I mean, at the end of the day, you're dealing with Mother Nature here.
That's so true. And you can't exactly program a fish to cooperate, can you? So you really need to be able to think on your feet, make adjustments when things don't go according to plan.
Exactly. You got to be resourceful, use your knowledge and experience to come up with solutions on the spot.
Yeah.
Oh, and something else I wanted to add, teamwork. That's huge in this field.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, because harvesting operations usually involve a whole bunch of different people, right? Biologists, engineers, even the marketing team. Everyone has to be on the same page.
So strong communication and collaboration skills are key.
Absolutely. Being able to clearly communicate what you're seeing, share your ideas, work together towards a common goal, that's mission critical in aquaculture.
It's just amazing to me how this career path really touches on so many different aspects of the whole industry, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you're not just siloed into this one tiny task. You're part of this larger ecosystem.
Right. And that's one of the things that makes it so rewarding, I think. You're contributing to something much bigger than yourself, helping produce a vital source of food in a way that's good for the planet, good for the economy. It's a win-win.
Speaking of the bigger picture,
Hmm.
one of the things that really stood out to me in the RoleCatcher guide was the emphasis on the global nature of this whole industry. They mentioned travel opportunities, the fact that aquaculture is booming
Oh,
worldwide.
yeah. It's a truly global industry, no doubt about it.
Right. So what are we talking about here? Someone in this role could potentially work internationally, experience different cultures, maybe even help set up more sustainable seafood production in developing countries.
Absolutely. It's an incredible opportunity, especially for someone who's got that adventurous spirit, that desire to make a real difference on a global scale.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the skills you need, the tech that's changing the game, the challenges, the rewards, the potential for an amazing global career. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, this idea that it's a competitive field.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who's thinking, okay, this sounds amazing, but how do I even break into this field? What's your final piece of advice?
Don't be afraid to dive in. I mean, that's kind of appropriate here, right? No, but seriously, if you're passionate about sustainability, if you geek out over the intersection of technology and nature, if you love a challenge and you love working in a dynamic environment, this could be the perfect fit. And remember, there are resources out there like RoleCatcher that can help.
Absolutely.
They'll help you navigate the job market, connect with the right people, and gain the knowledge and skills you need to really thrive. The future of aquaculture, it's bright. And Aquaculture Harvesting Technicians, they're going to be leading the charge.
I love that. What a great note to end on. This has been such an eye-opening deep dive into the world of aquaculture harvesting technicians. It's definitely a career path I didn't know much about before. But I have to say, I'm seeing seafood in a whole new light now. And for our listeners, if you're hungry for more info, pun intended, be sure to check out RoleCatcher's full career guide. We'll link to that in the show notes. And whether you're thinking about switching careers or just curious about, well, everything, remember, knowledge is power. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, keep diving deeper into those things that spark your curiosity. Until next time, happy listening.